Hey everybody, my name is Trevor Spires. Welcome to Automating NSX and vSphere with Terraform. Right? We're going to talk about Terraform and how you can leverage this to run really a SDDC, so an on-prem cloud as code. So that's what we're going to cover today. Just a quick background. I personally, I'm not a Terraform expert. I just started playing with it a few weeks ago, and my goal here is actually to show you how quickly somebody can pick up this from having no skills at all in an automation platform like this. I really just had some background in basic. I've written a bash script or two. I have mostly worked in the CLI, Cisco, Linux, other systems. So if you know a little bit of CLI, but you don't know any code or automation, this is a really good starting point if you want to quickly and effectively automate your vSphere infrastructure, okay, and your NSX infrastructure. So let's start with the high level. What is Terraform, right? If you Google it, what you're going to find is people are calling this an infrastructure as code tool, which makes sense. It's a tool where you can pre-build out items and topologies within your data center and cloud environments too. And you build these out, and you basically come through, and there's a file, right? There's a config file that you create. In my lab, it's called main.tf. This is where you determine your intent, right? This is where you tell your infrastructure what you want it to do, right? So what you could say is something like, I would need one router, maybe I need 3 switches. I'll have to correct that. And maybe I need one load balancer. Maybe that load balancer needs a VIP, and maybe it needs a pool, and finally I need a VM, right? And the idea here, let's make 5 VMs. The idea here is you come in, and within this, really just a text file, that's what the main.tf file is, just a text file. You put these attributes in here, and then you say run, and then automatically behind the scenes, Terraform basically scripts the creation of all of these things that you've asked it to create, right? So no coding required on your end. All you really do is come in and declare, right? You say, I want this, and this, and Terraform will automatically build it for you. It really is like super simple. So yeah, I'm excited to show you guys what you can accomplish with it, right? Quickly, here are some kind of high level Terraform concepts. So there are config files, right? So these are those .tf files, just text files that we talked about. In my lab, I've got a variables file. The idea of the variables file is you have environment specific variables like passwords and vCenter IP addresses or things of that nature. So that way it makes the code modular, because I can give you my code and then you can fill out your own variables, right? And that's going to come into your Terraform environment, right? So it makes it so that you can just put in a few inputs and then use other people's Terraform files to build out your own infrastructure, right? The main.tf file, this is just the text file where we're declaring that intent, where we're saying, hey, I want a router, I want to switch. So this is in vSphere and NSX. So I'm saying I want a tier 1 gateway, I want a VM, I want a segment, and it's going to create all that for us after we declare it in that main.tf file. Okay. Within the main.tf file, there are really 3 components that matter for this demonstration. One, there's a provider, right? You declare those right at the top. That's basically saying, NSX, vSphere, AWS, Google, whatever you're trying to automate, you basically tell Terraform, hey, let's pull this in. This is going to be a provider that I'm going to start automating with Terraform. It's really that easy. It's just a couple lines, okay? Second, you define data. That's resources or a resource in your environment that exists already or that you're just referencing, right? So data would be, in my case, in my example, I'm using my edge cluster into NSX and my tier 0 as data because they already exist. I don't need to create one. I'm just going to connect things up to those with my Terraform file. So I pull those in as data because I don't want Terraform changing them or creating them. I just want to reference them, okay? And finally, there are resources. Resources is really where the magic happens. That is what Terraform is automating, what Terraform is creating, right? So that's where you should spend most of your time defining resources within your Terraform files, okay? So that's Terraform 101. You know, there's a little more to it, and it has more than just these capabilities, but just knowing these really 5 concepts, you can do a lot of serious damage with Terraform, okay? So here's what we're going to look at in my lab, and we'll roll right over to it in a second. I've basically written, through pulling from other people's code and mostly working from the Terraform documentation, that's really good stuff. We'll look at that too. I'm going to build out a tier 1 gateway, 3 segments, right? So 3 effectively VLANs or overlay segments for NSX. And finally, I'm just going to create a VM and attach it to one of those segments, right? The idea is to give you, whoever's watching this, some code, and I'll post it to GitHub. You can pull it down. It'll probably be in the description here. The idea is to give you code as a kind of a starting point to play around with Terraform in your NSX or your vSphere environment, okay? So with that said, I'm going to roll over to my lab, and then we're going to take a look at the at Terraform, the code, and then we're going to run it, and you're going to see how this stuff gets created. So real quickly, let me show you, right? I'm in my NSX manager, and I'm in the topology view, which basically this is just NSX showing me what networks and routers that exist. The thing I want you to take away from this is there's no Terraform routers, right? I have some other resources I've created. Nothing here is being created by Terraform. And later I'm going to run my Terraform code, and you're going to see this change. You're going to see some resources be created, okay? So really what I want to spend most of our time on today is looking at the code itself, right? We're going to go over again those concepts that we talked about, and then we'll run the code. You'll see what happens, and we'll close it out, okay? So I mentioned there are really 2 files in my environment, right? I have a variables file, which is where I'm putting in environment specific information, right? So these are my usernames, my passwords. I'm putting in my vCenter IP address, my NSX manager IP, and then I have some names that I've put as variables because I want them to be modular, right? What I want is for you to take this code and say, hey, Trevor made a web segment, but maybe I don't need a web segment. Maybe I need a, whatever segment. Maybe I need something else. Maybe I have different naming conventions in my organization. So you can come in and edit this, and then that'll be what's referenced later, right? So basically, this is what allows you to customize it to your environment, okay? And then I have my main.tf file. This is where we're referencing provider data, right? So we're telling Terraform, hey, we're going to use NSX as a provider. We're going to be configuring things in NSX, and we're going to be using vSphere as a provider as well. That's really it. There's only 2 providers that you need to automate the SDDC right now, okay? And there's some things that we can specify here. You can see I'm allowing unsigned certs, things like that. But the thing to note here is I'm actually referencing those variables, right? So here, for example, var.vsphere_user, if I look at my variables file, that relates to variable vsphere_user. Makes sense, right? So all I'm doing with these variables is I'm referencing them in this main file. And again, that just allows you to change those later and reuse this code in different environments, and you have different names and vCenters and passwords, etc. Okay, so these are my providers. Pretty straightforward. Okay, the next thing I've established in this Terraform code is the data, right? So in my environment, I've referenced my transport zones because I need those because I'm going to be creating segments and assigning segments to these transport zones. I've established my tier 0 gateway, my edge cluster, right? These are all specific to my environment. So put in whatever for your environment is necessary here, but there's nothing stopping you. It might be a good exercise to move these over to variables too, and then put these in as variables to make it even more modular, okay? So this is data. Again, data is existing stuff that we're referencing. That's it. That's all the data is within Terraform, okay? And so you see I have providers, boom, that's just a little snippet of little code snippets that are defining these different things. I have little data snippets, and I can move these all around within my file however I'd like. And then finally, really, again, like I said, the magic happens when we get to resources, okay? Resources are things that I'm telling Terraform to automatically create, right? I'm telling Terraform to automate the creation of these for me. So in my example, I have a tier 1 gateway with some various settings, right? And all this stuff is things that I just pulled from the Terraform documentation. It's really good. So I'll run you through that here in just a moment after we run this code. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, right? This stuff is fairly straightforward. It's just you declare a resource, you give it a name, and then within that resource, you configure it, right? You tell Terraform, this is how I want you to configure this resource. That's it, right? You can get fancy with this. You can come in and do things like, for example, I have only one segment, but you could come in and do something, maybe add a section called count to this. So this is something that's kind of outside the scope of this, but you can say, hey, I defined this segment, but let's just go ahead and make 5 of them, right? And it'll go boom, 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 create 5 segments for you versus 1, right? So you can scale this up and down really rapidly. That's kind of part of the value of Terraform. Okay, I didn't mention this earlier. Terraform is a free tool. Okay, I'm using the free version. Maybe if you're an enterprise, you would pay for it, but if you're just doing this in a lab or you're like a DevOps type person, I think the free version it can work pretty well for you. It's been working for me in my lab, and the free version is built on the same code as the paid version. The paid version just has a nice fancy GUI and it's more made for teams. Okay, so anyway, these are my resources. All right, I've got my tier 1. I've got some policy segments. All of this is being done via the policy API in NSX. The last thing I do in this code is create a virtual machine. Okay, that's really the last thing I do is I create a virtual machine and I connect it to the web segment that I created earlier. Let me see where that is in my code actually. Network ID. So this network ID is being referenced from that web segment that I created earlier, right? And yeah, anyway, this is a snippet of code for a VM. Again, you can put counts here and create multiple VMs, but you can use this kind of as a building block for your other VMs that you create. The only thing that I'll note here is I have specified a specific template here, and this is a template that I've imported as data. So what you'll want to do is define a template in your environment. I have just an Ubuntu template here, but you can make it Windows, Ubuntu, whatever you like. The world really is your oyster in this with this tool. From what I've seen, I haven't hit any limitations with it yet. That's what I'll tell you. So far, everything I've wanted to do with it, I've been able to do with it. So I'm gonna end this piece, right, and I'm gonna take us over to my console, my Linux box, where I'm gonna run this code. So I have these files open just to show you that, and then what really you do with these is you load them into a directory. Oh, excuse me, this is not the right box. Here we go. Really what you do with those 2 files, your variables file and your main file, is you put those into a directory here in some kind of box. I'm running this on Ubuntu, but again, you can run Terraform on Windows, Mac, Ubuntu. There's a lot of different options. So that's it. These 2 files are the only thing in my directory. I've created this tf_dev directory. It's my Terraform development. That's it. So within this, I have Terraform installed on this box. So all I have to do is run the command while in this directory. So I've changed to the Terraform dev directory, the tf_dev that you see here. I've had my 2 Terraform files in that directory. All I have to do is run, first I'm gonna run Terraform plan, okay? what this does is Terraform now is going to look at all of the things that I've described in that file. It's going to look at that intent that I've given it, and it's going to run through it. It's going to basically just check to make sure that this code's actually going to work when I run it. Okay, so it's going to go through that, and then the last thing it's going to do is show me all the changes it's going to make. So I could go through and audit this myself to see, hey, these are all the things that are going to be done if I were to run Terraform from this directory with that main.tf and the variables.tf file that we just spent the last few minutes looking at. So I'm going to let this run for a minute. I may end up cutting this out. Okay, so if I could figure out my video editing software, I'd probably just edit it out like the last 10 seconds. I ran Terraform plan. This is Terraform telling me all the stuff that it's going to create. Okay, that's all this really is. These are all those different pieces of NSX resources and vSphere resources that I'm going to create from that code we looked at just a few moments ago. Okay, so I ran the plan. I agree with it. The plan tells me high level it's going to create 16 objects and create a change, destroy, 0. So my next step is to run Terraform apply. Okay. Now what Terraform is doing, it's going to go through the same check, and then in a moment it's going to ask me, "Are you sure? Do you want to do this?" And I'm going to say yes. And then all of that intent that we define, right, that pre-created code is going to automatically start spinning up the resources in my environment. So let's wait for a minute while this does its check and make sure everything's good. I may cut this out too. Okay, so I've just run Terraform apply, and what Terraform has done is, again, told me all the changes that it's going to make, and it's asked me, hey, are you sure you want to make these changes? I'm going to say yes. Okay, I'm going to say I would like to make these changes. And what's going to happen now is Terraform is it's on its way, right? It's everything I've just declared in that module that we saw, those .tf files. Terraform is starting to churn away and create those, okay? And so really all I've done is say, this is what I want, and then Terraform behind the scenes is now manipulating the APIs of vCenter and of NSX Manager to create these things. And the cool thing about Terraform is, generally speaking, it's smart enough to know like certain dependencies. So it knows, hey, I need to create a port group before I attach a VM to it, right? So a lot of that logic is baked into the platform. So really, again, at the end of the day, all we're doing is, as administrators, as engineers, is telling it what to make, and it's going to create it. Okay, so this is going to take about another minute or two. What I'm going to do is I just want to show you. Okay, I built this code. Where did I get the code from to build this stuff? I just want to show you the Terraform documentation, right? Because the documentation is really, really simple to use. And I'm referencing it a lot as I build this stuff out. So I have, if you just Google Terraform provider NSXT or Terraform provider vSphere, it's going to take you right to the pages that Terraform creates a documentation for this product. And we're going to see a lot of the different pieces that we cover, right? We see in the vSphere provider, I've got different data sources that I can reference. I've got different resources that I can create using Terraform. But really where it becomes powerful and useful to me, there's some example configurations and things like that. I can go find the resource I want to create. So like, for example, I want to create a virtual machine. And Terraform is going to give me some example code to basically tell me exactly how to do that within their platform. And they're going to tell me all of the different variables and inputs that are required or optional for that. So let me scroll down to the bottom here. They're giving you a bunch of really good examples. All I did was copy and paste one of their examples and then say, hey, my data store and my networks have different names, basically, and change those. At the bottom right, this helps us understand some of the different arguments that we can, define when creating a virtual machine with Terraform, okay? And You see some are required, makes sense. You need a name for your VM. You don't necessarily need a resource pool, right? So some are required, some are optional. The big takeaway is if it's required, right? If it says required right here in the documentation, in order for Terraform to successfully create that resource, you have to define it somehow, right? You have to define it. So that's something that's been helpful for me, is just kind of that high level understanding of the documentation, how to read it, how to interpret that. So I would encourage you to look at the Terraform files that I've uploaded to GitHub in the description, and play around with this yourself, change some of these variables around, okay? So that's Terraform documentation. Again, it's great. It's really good documentation, and you're going to need to know how to use it. So I wanted to show it to you if you're going to use this tool, okay? I'm going to go back to my Linux box. I keep pulling up the wrong box. Okay, so here, okay, cool. So I ran Terraform apply rather. Sorry, I ran Terraform apply. It created all 16 of these objects, right? It took a few minutes while it was spinning all this stuff up automatically. If I was doing this via the GUI, this easily would have taken me like 20 or 30 minutes, and I probably would have made a couple mistakes. I probably would have fat fingered a couple IPs. This is a really clean way to provision infrastructure, okay? And I use this for demos a lot because I can create these custom demos and just blow them away and spin them up and down. But customers oftentimes use this in their production environments to provision infrastructure, right? That's really what it comes down to. It's infrastructure as code, okay? So we see this was successful. So now I'm going to take us back into NSX. I'm going to refresh my NSX topology, and hopefully we're going to see the new networks that were created. This is a good sign. So let's zoom in. Okay, cool. So here we have exactly what we just looked at in the code. And I would encourage you to again, look at this code if you're really trying to learn this cool tool, and reference this against what is created here at NSX, right? I created my tier 1 gateway. I created 3 segments attached to that. I configured DHCP on my tier 1 and on my segment, and this VM is pulling a DHCP address from NSX, and that's it, right? These are really kind of some of the foundational building blocks that you need to build out your own applications and your own infrastructure with Terraform, okay? So I suppose I could show you the VM in vCenter real quick, just so you can see that it did pull an IP address. But other than that, I mean, that's really it, everybody, right? You can use Terraform as an automation tool, as a general configuration management tool to rapidly deploy and change and deprovision your environment, right? In this declarative model, and there are efficiencies to that, right? Automation is probably number one. It makes it really quickly to automate this stuff. Makes it really easy and quick to automate this stuff. And I think it's just the fact that it's really modular, right? I can run this between environments and scale out pretty quickly and effectively. So I've got my web VM. Let me show you that it did pull an IP. It did indeed pull an IP address, right? And that's really it. I don't have anything on this web VM to show you. I don't have anything else. It's just the infrastructure here today. So I hope this has been helpful. I don't know how long this went, but if you have any questions, you can message me on YouTube or via the blog. Let me know. I'm new to this thing too. I'm new to Terraform too. So maybe I missed something that you think is really important for somebody like me to know who's just learning the tool. Share it. You know, I think it'd be useful, and it's something that we can share out with the community. So I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and upload this very basic Terraform runbook, these Terraform files to GitHub. That's going to be in the description below. And just thanks for watching. Again, if you got any questions, let me know. But I think this is, if you're trying to automate your infrastructure and you've got a background in CLI, I think this is probably the tool you want to start with. I've tried other things. I've tried to learn Python and all these, I'm trying to learn JavaScript. I've tried to learn how to code. I don't think I need to anymore. I think I can just use this and other tools like Ansible and other automation tools. So I don't need to learn how to code. I can just define these variables and start automating infrastructure this way. So, okay. Again, thanks everybody. And I hope this has been useful to you. And let me know what you think. And if you got any questions, all right, bye.